Jan, you've been covering the Supreme Court for more than 2 decades now. Did this result come as a surprise to you?
No, I mean, in many ways, I think it was pretty clear after the oral arguments in this case that this was a court that was deadlocked. And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing this term. I mean, without Justice Scalia, who of course passed away in February, on some of these contentious cases, the justices are struggling to reach a decision. This is a divided court on these social issues. You've got 4 liberals and 4 conservatives. Obviously, when Justice Scalia was still on the bench, the conservatives held the majority in most of these cases. But with his absence now, I thought this was pretty clear that this one was going to deadlock the court unless they were able to come up with some very narrow compromise. And of course, as we saw today with that one-line order, they simply were unable to do it. And what that means now is that the lower court opinion will just stay in place. There's no nationwide precedent. But because of the time frame here on this issue with the president leaving office at the end of the year in January, it's really effectively means his program is dead. So it's the end of the road for his efforts to reform immigration.
Well, and we've seen President Obama live and die, really, with Supreme Court rulings throughout his presidency. What does this one tell you about the court's view of executive power?
Well, unfortunately, it's nothing, because there's no opinion for us to parse over. There's nothing for us to analyze. There's no direction that the Supreme Court is giving. And again, that's kind of one of the impacts of having a court with 8 justices. When they do deadlock, there is no decision. They just essentially say we couldn't decide and we'll let the lower court ruling stay in place. If Justice Scalia had been on the Supreme Court, I think you would have seen a really robust decision scaling back the president's use of executive power, not only this president, but future presidents. We didn't get that today. So there will be other cases. Presidents always like to push the envelope of their authority. The Supreme Court will eventually have to decide what those limits are, but it will not be this Supreme Court of 8 justices. It will be a court with 9 justices, assuming that whenever gets confirmed, and it'll be a different issue.
Before I let you go, Jan, we heard the president go after Republicans in Congress, saying that their failure to consider his nominee to the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, contributed to Thursday's order, which you indicated as well. Where would you put the odds as they stand for Garland to even get a hearing before Obama leaves office at this point?
You know, that's a great question, and I think you're starting to see in the last month or 2, you're seeing some Republicans saying, look, this may be the best nominee that we could get. He's older, he's in his 60s, he's considered a liberal, but he's not some kind of flamethrower. So the next president, if it's a Democrat, could appoint someone much younger and maybe even more to the left. So perhaps let's go ahead and confirm him. But there's no interest in doing that from Republicans in the Senate right now. They are really holding firm. I think the best case for Merrick Garland would be perhaps a hearing in November after the election if Hillary Clinton wins the nomination. Of course, if she doesn't, Merrick Garland will never see inside the Supreme Court. If she does, she may renominate him in January.
Great insight. Jan Crawford in Washington for us. Thanks so much.
Sure, Jamie.